Jake Murphy floated through the main corridor of Nexus Prime, his magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor. The space station was huge, bigger than any city he had seen on Earth. Lights from 100 different alien worlds mixed together, creating colors that had no names in human language. The air smelled strange too, like metal and electricity mixed with things he could not identify. He had been traveling for 3 months to reach this place. Nexus Prime sat in the orbit of a gas giant called Kepler 442b, far from any star system that humans called home. This was neutral space where no single alien race could claim control. It was the perfect place for diplomatic meetings and trade deals between the many species that filled the galaxy. Jake stopped at a large window and looked out at the swirling clouds of the gas giant below. The planet was beautiful in a way that made him feel very small. Purple and orange storms moved across its surface like slow rivers. He had seen pictures of it before, but seeing it with his own eyes was different. "First time seeing a gas giant up close?" asked a voice behind him. Jake turned around and saw Lisa Brown walking toward him. She was his partner on this diplomatic mission, and she had been to space many more times than he had. Her short brown hair was tied back in a practical style, and she wore the same dark blue uniform that all Earth diplomats wore. "Yeah," Jake said. "It's bigger than I thought it would be." Lisa smiled. "Wait until you see the aliens. They're bigger than you think too." They walked together toward the diplomatic section of the station. Along the way, they passed many different types of beings. Jake tried not to stare, but it was hard. There were tall, thin creatures that looked like they were made of glass. There were short, round beings covered in fur that changed colors as they moved. One group looked like giant insects walking on 2 legs, their wings making soft buzzing sounds. Most of the aliens they passed looked at Jake and Lisa with curiosity. Some seemed friendly, nodding their heads or making gestures that might have been greetings. Others just stared with what Jake hoped was interest and not hunger. "Remember," Lisa said quietly as they walked, "we're here to make friends, not to prove anything. Earth needs these trade agreements. Our colonies are growing fast and we need resources from other worlds." Jake nodded. He knew the mission was important. Humans had only been traveling between stars for 50 years. Most of the alien races in the galaxy had been doing it for thousands of years. To them, humans were the new kids who just showed up to a party that had been going on for ages. They reached the diplomatic quarters, where Earth had been given a small section to use during the negotiations. The room was simple with basic furniture that could be used by most types of beings. Jake set down his bag and looked at the schedule Lisa handed him. "Tomorrow we meet with the Altarian Trade Council," she said. "They control most of the rare metal mining in this part of the galaxy. The day after that we talk to the Centauri Collective about food shipments to our outer colonies." Jake studied the list. There were meetings planned with 12 different alien groups over the next 2 weeks. Each one controlled something that Earth needed. Water, metals, energy sources, medical supplies, technology. The list seemed endless. "What about the Vorthak?" Jake asked, pointing to a name on the schedule. Lisa's face grew serious. "They're the tricky ones. Military power. They control a lot of shipping routes between the core worlds and the outer rim. If we want to expand our colonies, we need them to let our ships pass through their space. Are they friendly?" "They respect strength," Lisa said. "The problem is they don't think we have any." Jake had read about the Vorthak during the long trip to Nexus Prime. They were warriors, standing 8 feet tall with 4 arms and hard shell-like skin that could stop bullets. Their society was built around combat and honor. They had been fighting wars across the galaxy for over 2,000 years. After unpacking, Jake decided to explore the station. Lisa stayed behind to review their negotiation strategies, but Jake felt restless. He had been on spaceships for months, and he wanted to walk around somewhere that felt more open. He found his way to the recreational deck, a large area where beings from different worlds could relax and socialize. The ceiling was clear, giving a perfect view of the stars and the gas giant below. Groups of aliens sat at tables, drinking strange liquids and eating foods that Jake could not identify. In one corner, a crowd had gathered around what looked like a game. Jake moved closer to watch. 2 aliens were arm wrestling, but they each had 4 arms, so they were using all of them at the same time. The crowd cheered and made noises that might have been laughter. At another table, beings were playing what looked like chess, but the board was 3-dimensional and the pieces moved on their own. Jake watched for several minutes but could not figure out the rules. Near the center of the room, a group of tall, muscular aliens was demonstrating their strength. They were crushing metal objects with their bare hands, and the watching crowd was making impressed sounds. Jake recognized them from his studies. These were Vorthak warriors. One of them was particularly large even for his species. His shell was darker than the others, and he had markings on his arms that showed he was high-ranking. He was talking loudly, and although Jake could not understand the language, the tone was clearly boastful. Jake found a quiet corner where he could sit and watch without drawing attention to himself. He ordered a drink from a small robot server and settled in to observe. This was his job, after all. Understanding alien cultures was the first step in successful diplomacy. The Vorthak warrior picked up what looked like a solid metal bar. With two of his hands, he bent it into a perfect circle. The crowd made appreciative noises. He threw the twisted metal onto the table and laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. Jake sipped his drink and made mental notes. The Vorthak valued physical strength above almost everything else. They showed off their power to gain respect from other species. Tomorrow, when he and Lisa met with their representatives, they would need to be careful not to appear weak. But for now, Jake was content to sit and watch. The galaxy was a big, strange place, full of beings he was only beginning to understand. Jake was finishing his drink when the large Vorthak warrior noticed him. The alien's four eyes, arranged in pairs on either side of his head, focused on Jake with clear interest. The warrior said something to his companions, and they all turned to look at the human sitting alone in the corner. The Vorthak stood up from his table. He was even bigger than Jake had thought, probably close to 8.5 feet tall. His dark shell gleamed under the lights of the recreational deck. The markings on his arms were definitely rank indicators, Jake realized. This was someone important. The warrior walked over to Jake's table with slow, deliberate steps. His boots were heavy, making loud sounds on the metal floor. Other aliens in the area noticed what was happening. Conversations grew quieter. Some beings stopped what they were doing to watch. "You are human," the Vorthak said in heavily accented but clear English. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks tumbling down a hill. Jake stood up politely. Even standing, the top of his head barely reached the alien's chest. "Yes, I am. I'm Jake Murphy from Earth's Diplomatic Corps." The Vorthak made a sound that might have been laughter. "I am Zexthera, third war leader of the Vorthak Dominion. I have heard about your species. You come from what the galaxy calls a deathworld, yes? Earth is our home," Jake said carefully. "Some consider it dangerous, but it's just normal to us." Zexthera's laugh was louder this time. Several other aliens turned to look at them. "Normal? You call a world of poisons and predators normal? A world where the weather can kill you and the ground shakes without warning?" Jake kept his expression neutral. He had heard this before. Most aliens came from worlds that were much more stable than Earth. Planets with gentle weather, few natural disasters, and animals that were not very dangerous. To them, Earth sounded like a nightmare. "Every world has its challenges," Jake said. "Challenges." Zexthara repeated the word like it was funny. "Your species evolved in constant danger. You had to fight just to stay alive every day. This makes you unstable, violent, unpredictable." More aliens were gathering now, drawn by Zexthara's loud voice. Jake recognized some of them from the diplomatic quarters, representatives from worlds that Earth was hoping to trade with. This was not the kind of attention he wanted. "We prefer to solve problems through discussion and cooperation," Jake said. Zexthera made a dismissive gesture with one of his four hands. "Pretty words. But everyone knows what deathworlders really are. You are barbarians who learn to use technology. You fight and destroy because that is all you know how to do." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "I think you have the wrong impression of humanity." "Do I?" Zexthera stepped closer. "Your species has been in space for what, 50 years? And already you have fought 3 wars with your own kind. The Martian Rebellion, the Colony Wars, the Jupiter Station incident." Jake could not deny these facts. Humans had indeed fought among themselves as they spread across the solar system, but they had also learned from these conflicts and worked hard to prevent new ones. "We've made mistakes," Jake admitted, "but we've also learned from them. That's why we're here, trying to build peaceful relationships with other species." Zexthera laughed again, and this time some of the other aliens joined in. The sound was not pleasant. It reminded Jake of broken glass being stepped on. "Peaceful," Zexthera said. "A deathworlder talking about peace. Tell me, human, What happens when someone makes you angry? Do you discuss and cooperate? Or do you show your true nature? Jake looked around at the growing crowd. Aliens from dozens of different worlds were watching this conversation. Some looked curious. Others seemed entertained. A few appeared to be taking notes. We believe that violence should be the last option, not the first, Jake said. Last option, Zexithera repeated. But still an option. This is what I mean. You cannot help yourselves. The violence is always there waiting. The Vorthak warrior began walking in a slow circle around Jake like a predator studying its prey. Your people think they can join galactic civilization, but you are too primitive. Too dangerous. You belong on your deathworld, fighting each other over scraps. Jake felt heat rising in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. Getting angry would only prove Zexithera's point. We've contributed a lot to galactic science and culture in the past 50 years. Like what? Zexithera stopped in front of Jake again. New ways to kill? Better weapons? More efficient methods of destruction? Medical advances, Jake said. Engineering solutions. Art and literature. Zexithera made a sound like spitting. Anyone can make art. Even the simplest species can scribble pictures. But true strength, true worth, that comes from power. Physical power. Mental power. The ability to dominate and control. The alien gestured toward the table where he had been demonstrating his strength earlier. This is what matters in the galaxy. Not your soft words about cooperation. Not your weak offers of friendship. Power. Jake looked at the twisted metal bar still lying on the table. Not everyone measures worth the same way. Oh, but they do, Zexithera said. They just pretend otherwise to be polite. But when it matters, when real decisions are made, it always comes down to who is stronger. The crowd around them had grown larger. Jake could see beings from at least 20 different species watching the confrontation. Some were whispering to each other. Others were just staring. Your species thinks it deserves respect just for existing, Zexithera continued. But respect must be earned. It must be taken by those strong enough to claim it. Jake remained silent, trying to think of a way to end this confrontation without making things worse. Zexithera seemed to interpret his silence as weakness. The warrior's laugh grew louder and harsher. Look at this. The mighty Deathworlder reduced to silence by simple words. How will your people react when they face real challenges? When they meet enemies who do not care about discussion and cooperation? Jake could see that several aliens in the crowd were recording the conversation with their devices. This encounter would spread throughout the station within hours. By tomorrow, every diplomatic delegation would know that a Vorthak warrior had publicly humiliated the human representative. I think this conversation has gone on long enough, Jake said quietly. Zexithera's eyes gleamed with satisfaction at Jake's words. Has it? But we are just getting to the interesting part, little Deathworlder. The Vorthak warrior moved back to his table and picked up another metal object. This one shaped like a thick rod. With a casual gesture, he crushed it between two of his hands. The metal groaned and bent like soft clay. He tossed the twisted remains onto the floor where they landed with a heavy clang. This is real strength, Zexithera announced to the crowd. Not words, not promises, not the pathetic attempts of primitive species to seem important. Jake watched as more aliens gathered around them. He recognized some faces from the diplomatic quarter. There was Ambassador Krelton from the Centauri Collective, and High Trader Vexami from the Altarian Council. Both had meetings scheduled with the human delegation in the coming days. Strength comes in many forms, Jake said, keeping his voice steady. Zexithera laughed so hard that his whole body shook. Many forms. Listen to this philosophy. Next you will tell me that weakness is actually a type of strength. Some of the aliens in the crowd made sounds that Jake assumed were laughter. Others remained silent, but their body language suggested they were entertained by the spectacle. I have an idea, Zexithera said, his voice carrying clearly across the recreational deck. Why don't we test this theory of yours? Why don't we see what form your strength takes? Jake felt his stomach tighten. I don't think that's necessary. Oh, but I do. Zexithera moved closer again. You see, your species wants to do business with the established powers of the galaxy. You want access to our trade routes, our resources, our protection. But how do we know you are worth dealing with? The Vorthak warrior gestured to the crowd with one of his arms. Everyone here represents species that have proven their worth. The Centauri through their vast trade networks. The Altarians through their mining expertise. My people through our military might. Jake could see where this was going, but he hoped he was wrong. What have humans proven? Zexithara continued. That you can survive on a dangerous world? Many species can do that. That you can build ships and travel between stars? Even the most primitive races manage that eventually. Zexithara held up one of his hands, spreading his 4 thick fingers wide. I propose a simple test. A traditional Vorthak challenge. Hand against hand. Strength against strength. Let us see what this Deathworlder evolution has really produced. The crowd grew excited. Jake could hear whispers and murmurs in dozens of different languages. Some aliens were pulling out recording devices. Others were making what looked like bets. I appreciate the offer, Jake said carefully, but I don't think physical contests are the best way to resolve diplomatic issues. Zexithara's laugh was sharp and mocking. There it is. The true nature of the Deathworlder revealed. All talk of strength and survival. But when challenged, you show your real face. Cowardice. The word hit Jake like a physical blow. Around the crowd he could see aliens nodding and making notes. The representatives he needed to negotiate with were watching him back down from a challenge. It's not cowardice to avoid unnecessary conflict, Jake said. Unnecessary? Zexithara spread all 4 of his arms wide. You want to do business with the galaxy, but you refuse to prove that you deserve to be taken seriously. This is very necessary, little human. Jake looked around the crowd again. He spotted Lisa near the back, having just arrived. Her face was pale with worry, and she was moving toward him through the gathered aliens. Think about it, Zexithara continued, his voice growing louder. Every species here has wondered the same thing. Are humans really as dangerous as their reputation suggests? Or are they just another weak race from a harsh world, trying to seem more important than they are? The crowd murmured agreement. Jake realized that this wasn't just about Zexithara's amusement anymore. The other aliens genuinely wanted to see what humans were capable of. One simple test, Zexithara said. Hand to hand. No weapons, no technology, just the strength that your Deathworld supposedly gave you. If you win, I will personally recommend that the Vorthak Dominion approve all of your trade route requests. Jake's eyes widened. Access to Vorthak space would cut travel times between Earth and the outer colonies by months. It would save billions of credits and open up dozens of new worlds for exploration. And if I lose? Jake asked. Zexithara's smile showed teeth that were sharp and white. If you lose, everyone will know the truth about Deathworlders. That you are no different from any other weak species. That your dangerous reputation is just a story you tell to make yourself seem important. Lisa finally reached the edge of the crowd. Jake could see her trying to push through to reach him, but the press of bodies was too thick. Jake, she called out. Don't do this. Zexithara turned toward her voice. Ha, another human. Even better. Let your colleague watch as you reveal the true nature of your species. Jake felt the weight of dozens of alien eyes on him. Representatives from worlds that controlled resources Earth desperately needed. Species that could make or break humanity's expansion into the galaxy. All of them waiting to see what he would do. The rules are simple, Zexithara said, holding up one of his massive hands. We grip hands. Whoever releases first loses. I will be generous and use only one hand against your one hand, though my people normally use all 4 in such contests. Jake stared at the Vorthak's hand. It was easily twice the size of his own. With fingers like thick cables and skin like armor plating, Zexithara could probably crush a human skull without much effort. What do you say, Deathworlder? Zexithara asked. Are you ready to show the galaxy what humans are really made of? Or will you prove that Earth's children are nothing but frightened children playing dress-up in a grown-up's universe? The crowd fell silent, waiting for Jake's answer. In the distance, he could hear Lisa calling his name, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. Jake looked at Zexithara's confident face, then at the eager crowd, then back at the massive hand being offered to him. All right, he said quietly. Let's see what we're both made of. The crowd pressed closer as Jake stepped forward. Someone had cleared a space in the center of the recreational deck, creating an impromptu arena. Aliens from dozens of species formed a circle around Jake and Zexithara, their eyes fixed on the 2 figures preparing to test their strength. Zexithara rolled his massive shoulders, the joints in his exoskeleton making soft clicking sounds. He held up his chosen hand, flexing his 4 thick fingers. I should warn you, little human. I have never lost one of these contests. Not to a Corthanian berserker, not to a Titan-class mining android, certainly not to a soft creature from a primitive world. Jake looked at his own hand, then at Zexithara's. The size difference was dramatic. The Vorthak's fingers were as thick as Jake's wrist and his palm was broader than a dinner plate. But Jake had accepted the challenge, and backing down now would destroy any chance Earth had of being taken seriously by the galactic community. "Jake, don't do this," Lisa called from somewhere in the crowd. "We can find another way." Zexathara laughed at her words. "Listen to your female. Even she knows this is hopeless. There is no shame in admitting that your species is not ready for the real galaxy." Jake ignored the taunts and focused on his breathing. He had learned meditation techniques during his diplomatic training, methods for staying calm under pressure. He would need all of them now. "Are you ready, Deathworlder?" Zexathara asked, extending his hand. Jake reached out and grasped the alien's hand. Immediately he felt the difference in their anatomy. Zexathara's skin was not just thick, it was like touching warm metal. The bones underneath felt solid and heavy, nothing like human bone structure. "The rules again," Zexathara announced to the crowd. "First to release loses. No time limit, no weapons or technology, just strength against strength." An alien that looked like a tall, thin bird stepped forward. "I will judge this contest," it said in a high, musical voice. "Participants, are you ready?" Zexathara nodded confidently. Jake gave a small nod as well. "Begin," the judge announced. Immediately, Zexathara applied crushing pressure to Jake's hand. The force was incredible. Like being caught in a mechanical press, Jake felt his bones compress and his joints strain. The Vorthak's grip was designed to end the contest in seconds, but Jake did not cry out. He did not release his grip. Instead, he closed his eyes and focused on something that Zexathara could not see or understand. Earth. Jake thought about his homeworld, the planet that had forged his species through millions of years of struggle. He remembered the gravity that was stronger than most worlds, making every step a constant exercise in strength. He thought about the atmosphere that was thicker and more challenging to breathe than the carefully controlled environments most aliens preferred. Zexathara's confident laughter began to fade as seconds passed without Jake's surrender. The Vorthak applied more pressure, his exoskeleton creaking with the effort. Still, the human held on. Jake remembered the stories his grandfather had told him about growing up in the mountains of Colorado. About hiking in thin air at high altitudes. About working construction in weather that would kill most alien species. About humans who could carry heavy loads for miles because their bones and muscles had evolved under Earth's demanding conditions. The crowd grew quiet as they realized something unexpected was happening. The contest that was supposed to last seconds was stretching into minutes. The human was not collapsing. He was not screaming. He was not surrendering. Zexathara's breathing became heavier. His exoskeleton was making new sounds now, stressed creaks and pops as he poured more and more strength into his grip. His other 3 arms were tense, his whole body engaged in trying to break the human's resistance. But Jake was thinking about more than just Earth's gravity and atmosphere. He was remembering the predators that had hunted his ancestors. Lions and tigers and bears, oh my, as the old saying went. But also snakes and spiders and diseases and natural disasters that had killed millions of humans throughout history. Only the strongest and smartest had survived to reproduce. Only those with the right combination of endurance and intelligence had lived long enough to pass on their genes. Every human alive was descended from millions of generations of survivors, each one tested by a world that showed no mercy to the weak or slow. Jake's muscles were not just strong. They were dense, packed with fibers that had evolved to work efficiently in high gravity. His bones were not just hard. They were structured to bear loads that would cripple most alien species. His cardiovascular system was not just functional. It was designed to deliver oxygen to working muscles under the most demanding conditions. Zexathara's laughter had stopped completely now. His eyes were wide with confusion and growing alarm. This was not going according to plan. Jake slowly opened his eyes and looked directly at the Vorthak warrior. For the first time in the contest, he spoke. "You wanted to see what a Deathworlder is made of," Jake said quietly. His voice was steady, showing no sign of strain or pain. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Zexathara tried to speak but could only manage a grunt of effort. All 4 of his arms were trembling now as he poured everything he had into his grip. The sound of his exoskeleton under stress was getting louder. The crowd was completely silent. Jake could see aliens staring at him with expressions he had never seen before. Shock, disbelief, something that might have been fear. Jake thought, about his training in Earth's military before joining the diplomatic corps, about exercises in full gravity with heavy equipment, about survival courses in environments that would be considered uninhabitable by most galactic species, about hand-to-hand combat training that assumed your opponent might be bigger, stronger, and better armed than you were. Humans had learned to win not through overwhelming strength, but through endurance, intelligence, and the kind of determination that comes from knowing that failure means death. Now, for the first time since the contest began, Jake began to slowly increase his own grip pressure. Zexithera's eyes went wide with shock and sudden real fear. Jake increased his pressure slowly, steadily, like a hydraulic press gaining power. He had been holding back during the first part of the contest, testing Zexithera's strength and endurance. Now he began to show what human evolution had really produced. The change in the Vorthak warrior was immediate and dramatic. Zexithera's confident expression dissolved into shock, then growing panic. His exoskeleton made new sounds, sharp cracks and pops that echoed across the silent recreational deck. "Impossible," Zexithera gasped, his voice strained and high. "You are just a soft species. You cannot—" His words were cut off by a sharp crack. One of the small bones in his hand had fractured under the pressure. The sound was clear and distinct in the silent room. Jake maintained his steady increase in grip strength. His face remained calm, almost peaceful, while Zexithera began to shake with the effort of trying to match him. The alien warrior's other three arms flailed helplessly, unable to help with the contest. "Please," Zexithera whispered, all of his earlier arrogance gone. "I yield." "I surrender," but Jake was not finished. The humiliation that Zexithera had tried to inflict on him, on all of humanity, deserved a complete response. The galaxy needed to understand exactly what they were dealing with when they encountered Earth's children. "You wanted to know what a deathworlder is made of," Jake said quietly, his voice carrying clearly in the absolute silence. "We are made of gravity that would crush most species. We are made of weather that changes without warning. We are made of predators and diseases and disasters that kill the weak and forge the strong." Another crack echoed through the room, as a second bone in Zexithera's hand broke. The warrior's breathing was rapid and shallow, his eyes wide with pain and disbelief. Jake continued his explanation, his voice never rising above a conversational tone. "We are made of ice ages and volcanic eruptions. We are made of famines that last for years and floods that destroy everything we build. We are made of having to start over again and again, because our world does not care if we live or die." The crowd of aliens watched in stunned silence as the largest, strongest warrior they knew was slowly crushed by a being half his size. Some were recording the event. Others seemed too shocked to move. "We are made of cooperation because alone we die quickly on our world. We are made of intelligence, because the strong but stupid do not survive long against Earth's challenges. We are made of endurance because our world demands that we keep going even when everything seems hopeless." A third crack. Zexithera cried out in pain, his voice echoing off the walls of the recreational deck. Tears were streaming from his eyes, but Jake's grip continued to tighten. "But most of all," Jake said, "we are made of restraint, because the ability to destroy is worthless without the wisdom to know when not to use it." With that, Jake released Zexithera's hand. The Vorthak warrior stumbled backward, cradling his damaged hand against his chest. His exoskeleton was cracked in several places and his fingers hung at unnatural angles. He stared at Jake with something that looked like terror. Jake flexed his own hand experimentally. There were red marks where Zexithera's grip had pressed against his skin, but no real damage. His bones were intact, his joints were functional. He could have continued the contest for hours if necessary. The crowd remained frozen in silence for a long moment. Then slowly, whispers began to spread through the gathered aliens. Jake could not understand most of the languages being spoken, but the tone was clear. Shock, awe, respect, and fear. Lisa finally managed to push through the crowd to reach Jake's side. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'm fine," Jake said. He looked at Zexithera, who was still staring at him with wide eyes. "But I think our friend needs medical attention." Two other Vorthak warriors had pushed through the crowd to help their injured leader. They supported Zexithera between them, but their eyes never left Jake. Their expressions showed the same mixture of respect and fear that Jake was seeing throughout the crowd. "How?" Zexithera managed to ask through his pain. "How is this possible?" Jake looked at the broken warrior with something that might have been pity. You made the same mistake that a lot of people make about humans. You assume that because we prefer peace, we are weak. You assume that because we choose cooperation over conflict, we are not capable of violence. Jake gestured toward the twisted metal objects that Zexathara had crushed earlier in his display of strength. You demonstrated your power by destroying things that could not fight back. That is not strength. That is just destruction. He walked over to where Zexathara had bent the metal bar into a circle. With slow, careful movements, Jake picked up the twisted metal. The crowd watched in fascination as he began to straighten it, using only his hands to reshape the metal back into its original form. True strength, Jake said as he worked, is knowing when to use your power and when to hold it back. It is having the ability to destroy but choosing to create instead. He finished straightening the metal bar and set it gently on the table. The metal was not just straight again, it was smoother than it had been originally, polished by the careful pressure of Jake's hands. Jake turned to address the entire crowd. Humanity does not want to conquer the galaxy. We do not want to dominate or control anyone. We want to trade, to learn, to contribute to the community of intelligent species that shares this universe. He looked directly at Ambassador Krelton from the Centauri Collective, then at High Trader Vixami from the Altarian Council. Both aliens were staring at him with expressions he could not read. But, Jake continued, we will not be dismissed as weak or primitive. We will not be humiliated or ignored. We are the children of Earth, and Earth does not raise its children to be victims. Zexathara, still supported by his companions, managed to speak. I apologize, human Jake Murphy. I was wrong about your species. Very wrong, Jake nodded respectfully. Apology accepted. I hope your hand heals quickly and completely. As the crowd began to disperse, Jake noticed that several alien diplomats were approaching him. Their body language was different now, more respectful, more cautious. The negotiations that had seemed so difficult a few hours ago suddenly looked much more promising. Lisa moved to stand beside him as the aliens approached. Think they got the message? She asked quietly. Jake watched as Ambassador Krelton bowed formally before speaking. I believe they did, he said. The galaxy had learned something important about humanity that day. Earth's children were not weak. They were not primitive. And they were not to be underestimated. They were deathworlders forged by the most demanding planet anyone had ever encountered. And they were here to stay.